If you want me to go missing these days, just say the word challenge and I'm out of there. I'm gone. I think I've been challenged enough. I don't want to be challenged anymore. It's like people say you don't want to be typecast. Yes, I do.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fairweather and welcome back to the next episode of The Third Act. Earlier this year, on a particularly hot day, I caught up with Bill Nighy at Auriens. At 74 years old, the actor seems to be in constant demand, bringing depth, thoughtfulness and verve to every role he inhabits. In this long and entertaining conversation, we discuss his new role as pioneering IVF surgeon Patrick Steptoe in the film Joy, and we touch on his chronic youthful shyness, his sense of imposter syndrome, and also the importance of always being well-dressed. Bill Nighy, it's so wonderful to see you. Thank you for striding with your long legs across London to Auriens Chelsea.
Thank you.
So we're here to talk about your new film, but I'm interested to see that even though you've been walking across London, the pavements in the heat of the summer, you look remarkably cool and collected.
Well,
how do you manage that?
Quite a lot of effort has gone into trying to maintain some kind of cool. I don't like the heat, and I walked according to the shade. I had plenty of time, so I couldn't do any of King's Road because there was no shade on King's Road. So I just navigated via the shadows, via the shade.
So you walk in the shadows, a bit like children walk, avoiding lines on the pavement.
Well, I do that as well. I still do that sometimes. I used to prick my hand on sharp railings on the way to school as a kind of penance, I suppose. I don't know. And if I missed one, I had to go back. I'm given to those kind of patterns.
Do you still sort of touch doors on your way out or look at cats and cross yourself? And
No, I don't. I'm not that. I walk under ladders and I don't fear cats. I do. If I'm doing a play, the list of things I have to say in the wings before I go on and the list of people I have to honour gets longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And it gets more and more elaborate. But it's not like, I don't live my whole life like that. But doing a play is a reckless decision. I opened a play a couple of plays back, and a young actor who was working with me came up to me and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "This is trauma, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "No, actual trauma." I said, "Yeah, actual trauma." He said, "Thank you." He just wanted to be sure that it wasn't just his personal private hell. And it's an understandable reaction to the prospect of going out and being the only one to speak in front of 1,000 people, and you've got to smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey and make love to a woman and eat, or whatever it might be, and you get laughed and move people in some way. It's a bananas thing to attempt.
Yeah. Have you ever had a situation where you've absolutely frozen and couldn't remember your lines?
The only time it ever happened was in the last play I did, and it was traumatic because it had never happened before. And one of my private boasts was that I'd never ever forgotten my lines in 1,000 years of acting. And my sister was in, and I just caught sight of her, and the lines went out of my head. And it was the result of complacency, and I suffered. I really suffered because there was no precedent, and I lost my 100% record, and it really hurt. And that anxiety didn't leave me for quite some time. It was really quite shocking.
And I've read that you have, what you've just said, you had terrible stage fright. And so,
where do you read that I had terrible stage fright?
I read it in one of the many articles I've read about you.
Well, it's not what people think of as stage fright. It's just every play I've ever done, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I know I'm not alone in this. I've stood in the wings on the opening night making a vow, and it's always the same vow. And the vow is that this must never, ever, ever be allowed to happen again. Because I could be on a film set with somebody bringing me a frappuccino. Yeah. I could be making some money. I could be, not frightened. What am I trying to prove? Who cares whether I can act or not?
So what is the answer to that? Why do you put yourself through it if you don't need to?
I don't really know. I think it's like anything that it won't be so bad this time or something. And also, I remember standing behind a set when I was young-ish with Anthony Hopkins, and in the dark, we were about to go on for an opening night at the National Theatre. And he said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, I'm scared." He said, "Yeah, so am I." And I said, "Doesn't it get any better?" He said, "No, it gets fucking worse." Because I did, like lots of young actors, you think, I'll get used to this or something, or it'll get easier or something. But in fact, the opposite is probably true, because the expectations are higher and you just don't quite remember how
terrifying it is. But it's also good to be challenged, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. If you want me to go missing these days, just say the word challenge and I'm out of there. I'm gone. I think I've been challenged enough. I don't want to be challenged anymore. It's like people say, you don't want to be typecast. Yes, I do. I do want to be typecast. I want to go to work every day. I want to wear a decent lounge suit and say clever things and, not have to bend myself out of shape or wear tight trousers.
How do you fend off boredom through typecasting? Or do you mind being a bit bored?
It's not boring. It's like there are certain things that people say to actors, and one of them is, in order to praise you, they will denigrate some other actor. And a popular way of doing that is to say, yeah, well, they always just play themselves. It's just the remark of someone who's not an actor or in that line of work. Because if you look, character acting isn't such a big thing anymore. There aren't many people putting false teeth in and, getting a limp and speaking in a funny voice or something. Acting's quite hard. And if the material is, is superior and everything, and you're involved with good people, it's a primary art form, in my view. And, one of my favorite actors of all time is Steve McQueen. But, nobody wants Steve McQueen to do anything than be Steve McQueen, because he's irresistibly...
Same with you, I think, because you have a presence and you can't help that. Whether it's presence or charisma, it's how you inhabit a space. So I find this very interesting. And interesting when I look at actors, I think it's very compelling how you inhabit your roles, because you are always Billish. And I was wondering whether it was a sense of Britishness or
Funny, 2 days ago, a woman came up to me in the street, perfectly nice, polite. She was not English, and she couldn't quite express what she wanted to say, whatever it was, apart from it was, presumably nice to see me, because she'd seen me in a film. And she struggled, and then she said, "You are such a Britishman." and as I was walking away, I thought, well, what? There is something's happened here. There is a conflation, because it's not the first time I've been described in that way, as if I was more British than some other British person, which I'm not, obviously, and I'm actually officially now Irish, but I don't know that, I don't quite understand that. Anyway, I'm not complaining. I'm very happy. It's very fine. I don't, but it is slightly mysterious that I should be so frequently described in those terms. It's just a bit odd.
I suppose that qualities of Britishness might be seen to be a certain sort of reserve, a certain sort of awkwardness, and sort of understated charm. All those things I would consider to be British, that you sort of conjure quite well.
My dad, I'm pretty much my dad. You're looking at my dad. My dad, this is my dad. If you want to know what Alfred Nighy is like, this is what he's like. This is what, and if Alfred Nighy was here now, you'd be very, very happy, because he was a very nice man. But, and my personal style is...
Your dad.
Is pretty much true. I didn't plan it that way. And I think when I was younger, I was going for something else, because I was determined not to be like my dad, like most young people try and attempt not to be their parents. But I don't have that phobia now. I don't have that problem, because I'm very pleased to be like my dad.
Did he see your success, or he didn't mind what you did?
He didn't see my success, which he saw me on television once. I robbed a bank on Softly, Softly. I was fourth bank robber from the left.
The left.
And that kind of encouraged him. He didn't panic when I said I wanted to be an actor. Because in those days, it was like saying astronaut or something. It was pretty exotic. And he didn't panic. And he said, well, I don't know how you do that. And I said, well, I don't know really how you do it either. And anyway, he said, well, we'll look into it. And I did a few theatre jobs, but I was very self-conscious. And I had great difficulty. I don't know how I do know why I persisted. It was just pride. I didn't want to have the conversation with anybody ever where they said, are you still acting? And me having to say, no, I gave that up. I couldn't face that conversation. So I kept going, but it was agony, real awful. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. Every single job, I would just feel totally ineligible and like an imposter.
Did you practice in front of the mirror to get rid of the self-consciousness?
No, I couldn't bear that. I couldn't bear to be in front of the mirror. That was part of the problem. I never thought I would be an actor. I went to drama school because I was enthralled to a girl. She was the first girl who ever paid any attention to me, and I overreacted catastrophically, and she fired me quite quickly. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was just useless. She had to get rid of me because it was just embarrassing for everybody, particularly me. But in those 3-4 weeks, she wrote the letter to the Guildford School of Dance and Drama, which we used to call the Guildford School of Prance and Murmur. And I went there, but I only went there because I thought we were probably going to spend the rest of our lives together, because I'd just finished being a Catholic. And we'd kissed quite a lot, where I thought, you know what I mean? I mean, quite seriously, I had names for our children. I didn't tell her, but I should have carried. I should have carried paperwork to that effect. That if you're nice to this boy, he will initiate a cult immediately. And anyway, she then got married in my first term to a sociologist from Leeds, and I had a broken heart for the first year. I just walked about.
Moping.
Well, I was completely destroyed, yeah.
That was at acting school?
That was at the drama school, yeah.
I also read that one of the useful things you learnt at that drama school was holding knives and forks, because that was...
They used to give us lessons, because it was the start of writers writing about working class life. Yeah. And we had a Labour government who organised the education of the sons and daughters of the working class, which was not a thing before.
Yeah.
So therefore, there was an influx into drama schools, presumably, there was in ours, of kids from various backgrounds, from various parts of the country, who had accents, for instance, and the teachers who were all middle-class English people. And I think some of them thought that we might, if we were doing a Noel Coward play or something, I don't know, if there was a banquet scene, we wouldn't know which knife to use. Mm. And they were right. I didn't know which knife to use. I'd never had more than one knife. I wouldn't have known what to do with the other knife or the other.
So it was a useful lesson.
Not professionally, but privately, it was quite handy to know which knife to use.
You're quite good at accents, aren't you? Was that something that you learnt there as well?
No, you don't. I don't think you learn that. I don't think you can learn accents. You've either got an ear or you haven't got an ear. But if you give me time, I can probably do most accents, And I have got an ear for accents, yeah. And then it became a thing where, because I'm not alone in this. I didn't like the way I looked, and I didn't like the way I sounded. I was just in the business of undermining myself. God. And I used to think that if I spoke in my own voice, I wasn't earning my money. Whereas if I did an accent, at least I can do the accent. So, and also if you can do an accent really well, it helps you act. It kind of
eases you into it.
It persuades you into sort of movement and general kind of characterful things that can help, yeah.
So so we were just talking about sometimes, always, never. Sometimes, never, always. No.
Sometimes you were right first time. Sometimes, always, never.
Where you have an accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were just telling me, I don't know if we were talking about this before the recording was going on, but you were telling me that it was called something else. What was it called?
Well, because the film is called Sometimes Always Never, which is a tailoring term referring to the ancient law of what to do with 3 buttons on a suit jacket,
Which is?
or any kind of jacket, which
sometimes.
is the top one sometimes, the middle one always, and God forbid the bottom one never. That's, but then you'll see crimes, football managers with all 3 buttons done up, which is usually because they have a tummy. It's usually because they think it's a slimming thing.
I've always been interested in people fiddling around with their jacket buttons, but were you always, I mean, you're famously dapper and people always talk about your wonderful suits, and indeed you're wearing a very wonderful pair of trousers.
These are made by...
High-waisted.
Well, you see, high-waisted is right there. It's like no one ever talks about low-waisted. My trousers finish where trousers are supposed to finish. And then you get people that need to make some money. They need to make some money by reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
So they take men's trousers down to just above the pubic bone, which is a terrible look and gives you a very long torso and probably short legs. And virtually no one can get away with it unless you're whippet thin. And it also puts the jacket out of balance, So it's not that I have high-waisted trousers. It's that a lot of fashion victims, and it's not their fault, it's imposed upon them by, manufacturers. They have low-waisted trousers.
What about this thing of wearing no socks with suits?
I don't mind if people do that as long as I don't have to stand or too close to them while they're doing it.
Italians call the British calze corte, short socks, because they can't understand why the English go around wearing sort of ankle socks and allowing this great gap.
Yeah, well, I don't understand any ankle socks either. I remember once being on a job and the young girls in the wardrobe, and I say young because they were young, and that was why they laughed. They laughed at my socks. I remember feeling, it was one of those moments where you think, I suppose I'm quite old, because they were laughing at an old man's long sock. But now I'm shameless. I've reached, one of the benefits of reaching a very advanced age is that, I tuck my shirt into my trousers. Get over it.
And you don't love ties, do you?
I don't mind a tie. The thing about ties is that nearly all of them are awful, and they're too padded. They're too thick. I don't mean in breadth. I mean, in depth. There's too much in them. I've had a couple of ties filleted because they didn't used to be like that, ties. And when I've done films or things from the 40s, because when things got really good was in the late 40s. That's when women looked marvellous and men looked marvellous. If you took 30 guys or 30 people off the street now and put them up against a wall, a few of them would look fine. In 1947, if you took 30 people off the street, everybody would look okay.
Yeah.
They'd all have a shape. It wouldn't matter whether they were large, small, tall, short. They'd all have, the clothes would give them a kind of shape. I mean, if I am doing a 1940s film or something, and it's of a certain budget or a certain schedule, and I need 3 suits or something, I just say, come around the flat, and I open the wardrobe, because the suits that I would have made or that would be made for me, they're pretty much what people were wearing. These trousers, for instance, you wouldn't be out of place if you wore these in 1947, anywhere.
So let's go back, though, Bill, because we are here to discuss your film Joy.
Yes.
Which is going to come out in
November the 22nd, I think.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
I found out yesterday.
So it's about Louise Brown, the first test tube baby. I even remember that miracle of science myself in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's set in the 1970s, and it's about the 3 people who brought us IVF. And I play Patrick Steptoe, who was the surgeon who performed all the procedures and delivered Louise Brown, for instance, and the two scientists who invented the process. For 10 years, they had no success. They were attacked by the newspapers. They were attacked by the church. In the case of Jean Purdy, who was the female member of the group, the scientist who was predictably airbrushed from the whole of history because she didn't have a penis. So this film will restore her,
Good.
to a large degree. Her family stopped talking to her because they were religious. They were given no encouragement by the medical association. They did everything in temporary buildings behind Oldham General Hospital because no one in London would give them any space or any money. And then 45 years ago, Louise Brown was born, and then the newspapers hailed them as medical pioneers, and everybody shut up. And now there are, it is estimated, 16 million women who would not have children had they not persisted for those 10 years. And obviously it's a big story, and it's written brilliantly by Jack Thorne and myself and James Norton and the wonderful Thomasin Mackenzie. They play the other parts. My hard-to-please team, my agent and my publicist, they say that it's an extraordinary film and that it is very, very moving and quite funny.
And I mean, the socio-political content's interesting, isn't it? It's about really examining the idea of playing God and the idea of, at the time, there was a worry, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, now in America there are certain factions who want to make it illegal, which is extraordinary, quite.
I wonder if being an actor is a wonderful thing, a bit like being a journalist, I suppose, in that you can walk around in other people's shoes and you can see if the grass is really greener on the other side. Does being an actor make you more certain or less certain about issues, like many of the issues that will come up in this film? Or does it give you such an open mind that, in fact, you're quite happy to sit on that fence forever?
Well, I think, because I left school what would now be considered early, so my further education was in the theatre, basically. And then I worked with writers. I've worked with writers all my life, and in those early years. And one of the things that helped was when I started to work with writers who were writing about things that I agreed with and things that I felt. It helped me enormously because I saw myself as part of a group of people trying to deliver certain information. And that helped me, rather than this all just being a painful, exposing, episode in my so-called career. I was actually involved in something useful. So get over yourself and get it out there because it's an important thing. The other thing that helped was when I worked with Ken Campbell, who was a genius. He didn't think like other people, if that's the definition. And one of the things about him was that he never rehearsed. He'd say, "You're all grown men. What do you mean rehearsal? You tell us a joke, Anyway, so we would hit the stage completely unrehearsed, which meant you just had to think on your feet and make it up. And I started to, occasionally, I would get laughs. And then all those years of watching, people, comics on television, I presume by osmosis, you get some kind of timing. And that's delicious.
Are you musical?
I'm not musical in as much as I don't play anything. I live all the time with music. I play music all of the time. It's the first thing I do in the morning is turn the music on. And often the last thing at night. And I have music in the car, in the trailer, in the hotel room, in my home, all of the time.
Really? So you have a beat in your head, so maybe that makes for a comic timing.
I don't know. I really don't know. But it is delicious. It's a very satisfying thing, if you get it right.
Do you prefer comic roles?
Well, in terms of the theatre, I used to quip. I'm now become somebody who quotes their own quips, which is always dangerous. But, that it's bad manners to invite people to sit in the dark for a couple of hours and not tell them a joke. And I would leave the plays without jokes to the younger actor, all of which is just PR nonsense. But it's sort of true as well. Information travels well in that form. So I haven't for years, like in living memory, I don't think I've done a play that didn't have laughs in it.
What about Joy? Has it got any jokes?
Joy apparently has some laughs in it, yeah. Quite a few laughs. Who knew? I mean, I have virtually always done new plays. And you know where the writer intends it to, to get a laugh. But you never really know where the laughs are until you've done it in front of an audience. And it's always I did a David Hare play with Andrew Scott in New York called Vertical Hour. And you knew where the jokes were because they were there and they were funny. But when on the first public performance, Andrew was just looking at me. It was like everything you said was funny. It was like they were ready to laugh. It was like there were all kinds of hidden laughs and things you don't expect to be funny turn out in performance to be funny.
The magic of the theatre, and actually just answered your own question about why you do it when you say,
well, there is
waiting to get out on stage. It's for the laughs. Must be such a
there is that
kick.
Yeah, if you get a laugh, you feel immediately welcome, and as I say, it's endlessly interesting. What
is your regime or your routine or your ritual when you're not working? What do you put on music and you get up?
Yeah, I put on a bit of rhythm and blues music, and I shave and drink tea.
What kind of tea?
Yorkshire, always. Yorkshire tea.
You ordered Yorkshire tea and Marmite when you were on the set in India for the Marigold.
Yeah, I did. In fact, I've been busted at Heathrow for Marmite twice because I took too big a jar. And at one point, I was being seen through by a young bloke to go to India, I think. And the bloke at security said, "You can't." He took out my jar of Marmite. He said, "You can't have that." I said, "Come on, man, it's Marmite." And they were all laughing. He said, "No, you can't. It's too." I said, "Well, can't I take some out of it and put it in something smaller? And then that would, conform to the guidelines." He said, "There's no decanting of Marmite this side of security." I said, "Show me that in writing." And they were all laughing, but he still took my Marmite. And then the young man who'd been seeing me through the airport, he took me to the lounge. And when he came back to get me, he'd got a paper bag and he'd found 32 of those little, horrible, painful little Marmite things that you get in,
sachets, yes.
And they saw me through the movie, which was quite good. And I smuggle Yorkshire tea.
Funny to the country where tea is.
I know.
Great.
But Yorkshire, I am properly addicted to Yorkshire tea, and I'll take other teas if I have to. The cliche is I draw the line at a cup of tea. If I can't, if I couldn't start the day with a cup of tea.
In a mug or in a porcelain cup?
At the moment, I drink from a cup, and it's perfect. It's the perfect size. It's not a mug. I don't like mugs. I don't like drinking out of a mug.
And milk?
The tiniest dash of semi-skimmed milk, yes. And it's ridiculously strong. You squeeze the tea bag from within an inch of its life, and you leave it in there for a long time, and you use a spoon, and you make sure that it's like what my grandmother used to call Connemara tea, where the other cliche, which is that the spoon would stand up in the tea.
You put hairs on your chest.
And all of that, yeah. So that's how I start the day.
And then do you write your memoir?
No, I don't write one. Oh, no. Then what I actively do, I may not look like it. If you had CCTV, you wouldn't necessarily notice this. But what I am actually actively involved in is not writing my memoir.
Okay.
It's all, from then on, displacement activity.
Are there any roles you'd really like to play? Is there anything... You've said, actually, you don't really want to play anything that's challenging and not challenging with...
No, I don't want any challenges, thank you very much. We want
a quiet life.
Well, no, not necessarily a quiet life. The operation is up and running and I'm vigorously involved in various things. But I was swiping right ways on my iPad the other night, trying to find something to watch. And I came across Sometimes Always Never. And I didn't know it was on there, so I clicked on it. And like they give you 5 other films. If you like this one, you might like me. And they were all about people dying. And I thought, if I screenshot this page, I could just give it to people as shorthand and say, this is what we don't want to be involved in. I've done my fair share of dying. and if I am going to die, I want to die in a hail of machine gun fire or jumping from a plane at 30,000 feet.
Right.
I don't want to die in my pajamas, and I'm not going to die on a drip.
No.
I have a thing about pajamas. I won't
wear them.
I don't wear pajamas, just for all those people out there who are desperate for this kind of information. All those people out there who've been wondering all these years, does he wear pajamas? I don't wear pajamas. But no, I won't wear them on camera. I always find some funky alternative.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't really a funky alternative, but I
boxer shorts, perhaps.
Well, you could wear boxer shorts and a Fred Perry, and you're out of there. It's, job done. But anyway, so at press conferences, when you get to my age, journalists say things like, so what's next? What's left, rather? Looking, you've got 10 minutes. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I used to joke, I used to quip, here I am again. I used to quip, I'd say, well, my action career is long overdue. Maybe I don't know what's happening. Maybe they're getting it ready now. Nobody's called. And everybody laughs, and it's like, ha, ha, ha. And then I was talking to my agent about it, and he didn't laugh. And I was only half kidding myself. And he immediately went into overdrive, and I do want to have, it would give me so much satisfaction at this point in my life to be some kind of ancient warrior and have a super.
Fabulous. Well, Liam Neeson does action films constantly, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And
he does his own sort of rolling out of the car and.
Yeah, he does. My action career so far, which is limited, involves me holding up a sword and being about to bring it down in a violent fashion and scream. I do the scream. And then I hand the sword to a much younger man who's wearing a wig to look a bit like me. And he continues with the process.
Well, you look pretty fit. You could probably be a warrior very easily.
Well, I think the way that it is, with the technology, I'd have to be even fitter. But the technology, you can get away with murder.
You know that
Exactly.
This place, Auriens, we don't call it a retirement home, we call it a place like a Marigold Hotel in Chelsea. They have a very good gym here with a treadmill and a brilliant trainer. You could come and train here. If you want.
I have a very, very, very good trainer. And I've been going to, I was never going, I was philosophically opposed to physical exercise as a slightly younger person. I was going to smoke until I died. And then about probably 15 years ago or something, I came to my senses and did a bit of, I gave up cigarettes, thank God. I gave up cigarettes much longer, actually 20 years ago or something. But I started to do any kind of physical exercise about 15 years ago. And and as all those people who told me, all the people that I'd ignored over the years who told me that it would make me happy, it makes me happy. It's very good for your head.
Yeah.
And apart from, being obviously good for your body and your system.
So you're a clean, lean fighting machine.
Well, yeah. I don't know about fighting, but yeah. But I'm going to have to.
The next part is the fighting machine.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get serious.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, Bill. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Catherine.
If you've enjoyed today's show, you can hear more episodes in the series by clicking follow wherever you're listening to this, or by searching for The Third Act on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. And if you think your friends would love to listen, please do tell them about us. This episode was produced by Pete Norton and made possible by Auriens, luxurious residences that are redefining later living in the heart of Chelsea. I'm Catherine Fairweather, and we'll be back in a fortnight for another episode of The Third Act.